All right, this is going to be our last video on trig. We're going to look at some examples, and we're going to look at how to use trig, how to use the opposite of trig or the inverse of trig, and how to punch that up on our calculators. So we're looking for angle A, we're looking for angle C, and we're looking for side B. Now, side B doesn't require any trig at all. You don't have to use trig. Trig is just another tool in your tool belt. That's how math works. We kind of get boxed in and think we have to do this certain thing because we're working on it in class now, and we have to do this certain thing because we're working on it in class now. But in reality, with math is just kind of filling out a toolbox, right? And what we don't want to do is we don't want to ignore, things that are in the first drawer of the toolbox because we happen to be in drawer 4. Who cares what drawer we're in? This toolbox is ours to use and use whatever we want. If we want to go back and use something that we learned way back in 6th grade, we totally can. That's part of our tool belt or our toolbox, our tool chest. So we don't want to throw things away and go, well, we're only allowed to do this because that's where we're working right now. You can use whatever you want. Imagine if you pulled your car into an auto body shop. You were working at an auto body shop and went, well, we just learned how to do brakes. I know you need an oil change, but we're going to fix your brakes. That doesn't make sense. I only need an oil change. So don't throw away all that old stuff. Math should build in, and then we're allowed to use anything that we have once we learn how to use it. So to get B, I don't have to worry about trigonometry at all. I can just do the Pythagorean theorem in order to get B. I can take 5 squared, add it to 12 squared, and that will equal B squared. Now, if all you do is memorize letters of a formula, you would go, well, wait a minute, it's supposed to be A squared plus B squared equals C squared. True, that's general, but letters can move around, and in this picture, B is the hypotenuse, and so it's got to be 5 squared plus 12 squared equals B squared. So don't let letters dictate how you're going to organize things. You have to let the picture organize it, because I can move letters around anywhere that I want. From here, it's pretty easy. You've done Pythagorean theorem before. You square these out. 25 plus 144 is equal to B squared. You add those up to get 169 is equal to B squared. But don't forget, you want B, not B squared. So you got to take the square root, and you take the square root of 169. If you don't know it, you punch it on your calculator, and it's 13. Look at that. We found one thing already, and we didn't have to do anything new. That's all old. That's just old school stuff. Yay. The other stuff is going to be new stuff. To get one of the other angles, I know that the angles have to add up to 180, but all I know is angle B is 90. That's all I got. I don't have anything else besides that 90-degree angle. Angle A and angle C, while I know that all three of them have to add up to 180, it could be that angle A is 20 and C is 70. It could be A is 40 and C is 50. It could be A is 1 and C is 89. There's lots of different combinations. So how do we know for sure the size of those angles? Well, we can use trig to do that, because remember, trig's ratios are true for every triangle that has that angle. For a 45-degree angle, the tangent of a 45-degree angle is always going to be 1 every time. Well, I don't know what these angles are. I do know all of the sides because I was given the 5, I was given the 12, and we just figured out B. So I can use any trig ratio that I want. I can use sine or cosine or tangent when I know all 3 sides. If you only know 2 sides, then you have to be careful. When you know all 3 sides, you get to choose any trig ratio you want. So let's find angle A first. So with angle A, if I mark angle A right there, not with the marker, but with the highlighter, there we go, there's angle A, we can label up the sides. B is the hypotenuse. Instead of writing out the full word, I'm just going to give it the letter. So B is the hypotenuse, that's H. 12 is going to be the opposite side, that's O, and 5 is the adjacent side, so that's a little a there, okay? So now that we have those values down, we can go ahead and utilize trig to figure out angle A. We can choose sine or cosine or tangent. It makes no difference at all. I'm going to go ahead and choose sine. And so remember, you can't just write this. That's just like writing a plus sign. You have to have an angle after it. What angle are we focusing in on? We're focusing in on angle A. So we're going to look at the sine of angle A. According to how we know the definition of sine, the operation that sine is the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Well, the opposite side is given to us, it's 12. The hypotenuse was B, but we figured out B. So don't put B there. We know what the value is. The value is 13. Now, We're going to have to do something new, something that you haven't seen before, but you've done this in past math things before when it comes to solving equations. Let's put this on hold real quick. I'm going to get rid of this, but I'm going to jump down here to the bottom. And what if we had something like x plus 5 equals 11? And we were asked to solve for x. Now, we can instinctively do it. It's pretty obvious what x is. But the way that we worked it through is we said, well, let's subtract 5. Now, why did we subtract 5? Because it's the opposite of adding 5. By doing the opposite, they cross out, and that leaves us with a 6. Right? That's nothing crazy. That's nothing weird. Same thing would happen if we had a different equation. Say our equation was 2x equals 18. And we were asked to solve for x, no problem, we would divide by 2. Why would we divide by 2? Because it's the opposite of multiplying, and opposites cancel each other out. So those 2's cancel out and would leave me with x is equal to 9. Right? So when you're solving equations, it's always about the opposite. And for everything that we've looked at in the past, we've known the opposite. What's the opposite of adding? Subtracting. What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. Right? That's all that we've worked with. Now we have a new operation. This operation is the sine operation. So what's the opposite of the sine operation? Well, this is something brand new for you. It's just another operation. Instead of having a different symbol, we just change the symbol a little bit. The opposite of adding is subtracting, 2 different symbols. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, 2 different symbols. The opposite of doing the sine, because that's the operation, would be doing what we call the arc sine. And we can write that a couple of different ways. I'm going to stick with one way to write it. We actually write out the word arc, A-R-C, sine, S-I-N. And so we're going to do that to both sides. This is an operation just like sine is. So we're going to do the arc sine of the left side. And then over here, we're going to do the arc sine of the right side. Arc just means opposite. So instead of doing the sine, we're going to do the opposite of the sine. Okay? And I'll explain how this all works in a second. I know this is brand new and you might be freaking out. Don't freak out. I explain things. You guys who've had me know that you're going to get the explanation and everything's going to be all right. So arc, sine, and sine are opposites. Just like adding and subtracting are opposites. Just like multiplying and dividing are opposites. And opposites cross each other out. So this operation and this operation cross each other out. And we're simply left with the letter A, which is what we're looking for. The other side, you have to use a calculator for this. Nobody does this without a calculator. Back in the day, when we didn't have calculators, people would calculate these things out and write them into books, and then everybody would have the book, and they'd flip and look in the book. Same thing here, we're just letting a calculator do it instead of having a book look it up. To do that, you can't do that with your calculator, with your iPhone calculator. Your iPhone calculator, even when you flip to the side, doesn't have this arc sine. You have sine, and then you have sine with an H by it. That's totally something different. You don't have the arc sine function. So what you need to do is download the Desmos calculator or go to desmos.com. Or buy yourself a scientific calculator. But if you go to desmos.com, their calculator's there, and they do have it. Now, it's not going to say arc sine. Instead, what it's going to say, it's going to have sine to the -1 power. Okay, those mean the same thing. And so go ahead and type that in on Desmos, and if you type that in on Desmos, it will tell you what the angle is, and the angle is 67.38 degrees. Okay. Now you have to be in degrees. There's 2 different ways to measure. Just like you can measure in inches or feet or miles, you can measure in something called degrees, or you can measure in something called radians. So you need to make sure you go to the settings, and DEG should be highlighted on your calculator, on the computer, wherever you're doing your work. That should be there, DEG, not RAD. You want DEG. Okay? And so there's angle A, 67.38 degrees. Super duper easy. Could we have found that a different way? Yes, we could have. I want to show you a second way to do angle A, just to see that you have options. Let's say you didn't want to do sine. Let's say you wanted to use the tangent function. Okay. So if we look at the picture, the tangent of angle A, tangent is going to be the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. The opposite side is 12, and the adjacent side is 5. Now, we're running into the problem just like we did up there. We have this tangent, we don't want it there, so we're going to do the opposite. The opposite of doing the tangent is called the arc tangent. Arc means opposite. And so we're going to do the arc tangent of the left side and we're going to do the arctangent of the right side, just like we would add 7 to both sides, or multiply both sides by 3, or divide both sides by 11, same thing. On the right side here, arctangent and tangent are opposites. Opposites cross each other out, so that and that cross out completely, and we're left with the letter A. On our calculators, we're not looking for arc. Most calculators don't use the full word arc. They use a -1 power instead, which means the same thing. And we punch that on our calculator, and when you punch that on your calculator, guess what you get? 67.38 degrees. Amazing. So there's 2 different ways to do this problem. We could use cosine, and we'd get the same answer. Now, to figure out the last angle that we need, angle C, we could go through and do all this trig, but the easier way, I'll do it up here in the right corner, I'm just going to get rid of the word desmos. The easiest way to find angle C is to remember that angles in a triangle have to add up to 180. So if I take my 90-degree angle and add to it my 67.38-degree angle, and then add to that the measurement of angle C, that's got to equal 180 degrees. From there, it's real easy to figure out the measurement of angle C as 22.62 degrees. Can just barely squeeze it in there, but there we go. Okay, so now we've got the triangle solved. We found A, we found C, we found B. That's one path of many that we could have taken. They all involve the same type of thing. Okay, so when you're finding angles, you have to use this arc sign. When you're finding sides, you don't. If you have the angle, everything's cool. When you're missing the angle, that's when you have to do the arc sign, or the sine to the -1, or cosine to the -1, or tangent to the -1. Okay, so you have to look at, what is it that I'm looking for? Do I know the angle? Then I punch that on my calculator, sine of 12, sine of 19, sine of 48 degrees. If I don't know that angle, but I know the entire other side, I know that decimal, 12/13, then I have to use the arc sign instead. So it's all about, do I know the angle, or am I missing the angle? So we need a little practice with that, and I have just enough room to squeeze in that practice homework assignment. That's going to happen on page 466. We're going to do problems 36 through 43, as well as problem 47 and problem 48. Briefly, problems 36 and 37, you're looking for sides. So you're going to type sine of, they give you an angle of 31 and 59 degrees. You're going to either use sine, cosine, or tangent, and you're just going to punch sine of 31 degrees on your calculator. It'll give you a decimal. For problems 38 through 43, they gave you the sides. They gave you 2 sides. They didn't give you any angles. So those problems are just like this one. You're going to have to use that arc sign or that arc cosine, which means you're either going to need to go to Desmos, or you're going to have a scientific calculator, one that has sine and this arc sign in there, to be able to do those problems. Problem 47 and 48 are just a couple of multiple choice problems. Don't just write a letter. You need to have work on all the problems. Otherwise, I won't give you credit. And if you're missing even one problem, you won't get any credit. You won't get the 10% grade bump. So make sure you're doing all of the work for every single problem on every single homework assignment. We don't have too many more of these left to do. I'm probably going to create maybe 2-3 more videos, and that's about it. You have until May 22nd to get that done, so make sure you're working on these. And if you have questions, send me a question on Remind, and I can go through whatever it is that you need to go through. Until then, have yourself a great day and stay safe.